All right, shalom, shalom, family. We're here doing Theory of Everything 21. Or is it 22? I know it's been a long time since I've done a Theory of Everything. Theory of Everything 21. The Three Kings. Okay, so, we've been going over the scriptures and chronologically going through time and Hebrew history, starting from the very beginning, starting from creation and discussing the way that the world works and the way that time works and how the world tries to introduce a counter creation, to combat belief in Elohim, right? So they present to you an entirely different story than the biblical story in order to draw you to another religion, which is what belief in modern science is. It's a pseudo-religion that is wrapped in a scientific package. It's got a few things in my hair here. And so we went over all that. We went over the scientific reasons why creation is more scientific than evolution, and we understand that. We understand the way that one works. Hey, how you guys doing? And then we also went over the pre-flood world being the exact same thing as the world of Atlantis that the Greeks have spoken about, and today there's modern folklore on it. We know the whole pre-flood world was the world of Atlantis. We went over also after the flood, and then the time scales thereof too, to give you a sense of where you are in history and where these things are in history. And if you want to go back over those videos, we go over all the points point by point and give you the biblical chronological order of time as it comes down to us, right? And so right now we are right after the period of the Judges, and we're in the United Monarchy. And so this theory of everything is called Three Kings. And so the concept that we want to deal with here is Israel, right? When we spoke about Israel, the man Israel, we spoke about how, he was kind of a slippery character, that he had both positive aspects and negative aspects. We know that his positives outweighed the negatives, but the negative aspects were worth mentioning because, they are, at that point in history, seemingly great, because what seems like is usurping an inheritance from another brother. And the other brother even mentions, hey, your name is heel grabber, and that's what you've done to me. You've grabbed my heel. And so we see that the man Israel wasn't a perfect figure in biblical history, wasn't a perfect figure in Israel's history, right? The people Israel himself wasn't a perfect man, right? And that's what we love about biblical history, because it's honest. It's, straightforward, and it tells you, basically how it is that the men were men, and they were flawed men. They were both righteous and they were wicked. There are times that Israel was righteous, and there were times that Israel was wicked, right? And this is what you see as well. Even in the name Israel, Yisrael, right? He will wrestle with Elohim, right? He will strive with Elohim. And so that striving with Elohim is what we can see in the history of our people, especially in the three kings, right? The first three kings of the first kings of Israel's history, the United Monarchy, right? And you can see that there's a positive and a negative aspect to all of the kings. You start off with Saul. We understand that Saul was, kind of a reluctant king, that he didn't want to be king. He was from the smallest tribe and the smallest family in that tribe. So he was reluctant to have that light shine directly upon him. And not only that, it was extra, extra light being shined, because the judge previous was Samuel, one of the greatest judges in Israelite history, who at this point, not taking on the role of a king, but taking on an authority figure role that, would be similar to that of a king, right? So Samuel is this judge, and the people are telling him, hey, we don't really want you as a judge. We really want a king like all the rest of the nations. We want to look and act like them, basically. We want to be able to have a representative, a mighty warrior. We can say that this guy is our king, right? And so Samuel's like, oh, man, they just hate me, right? These people hate me, And Yah said, well, they not rejecting you. They're really rejecting me. So you don't have to necessarily worry about it. But do what they ask, right? That's the thing. That Yah will sometimes, even if you ask for a bad thing, he will give it to you. To let you take it, taste it, let you see that it's bad, let you get the repercussions from this bad thing so that you can spit it out, right? So that you can understand that, hey, even though I asked for it and it was bad, Yah gave it to me in order for me to understand that it's bad. And so also to make his word come to pass. Because it's about him, it's not about us, right? And so he gives us what we want sometimes just to say, hey, I told you that this wasn't going to work. And that's what he said about a king. He said the king's going to take your daughters, he's going to take your sons, he's going to take your land, he's going to do all of these different things, he's going to take your money, and you're not going to get what you ask for in return, which is this mighty warrior for you to stand up. The trade-off isn't good. You're not getting what you're looking for. You're actually getting taken from. And well, of course we know that's what happens. But before any of that happens, we see Saul assume the role of king as this mighty warrior, as this mighty leader, as a man that, that Israel could be proud of, that would stand up in battle and face the Philistines and come out victorious. And we see that Saul starts to get this feeling that, okay, and then here's the other thing about Saul. He was a mighty man. He was a head taller than any of the other people. He looked kingly. He looked like a king. And Israel was proud to have this, their first king, and also being able to be such a mighty warrior as well. So the first king that we're talking about here is King Saul, who assumed the first ever kingship. And we know that there was some previous styles of king, but Saul is really the first king and the first king of the united monarchy, the glory days of Israel. Do you understand what I mean? Him, David, and Solomon would be considered the wonderful times of Israel, the times when Israel was the light of the nations, right? The light of the world, really. And so we see that Saul comes in, and he comes in gallant, he comes in victorious, and he begins to step out of his role as king and to take on a role that's beyond king, but also priest, right? Because he tries to offer sacrifice. And he says, well, the people, led me to do it. And Samuel gets onto him, as he should, And several other things that Saul did to show that he was really thinking of himself as the leader instead of Yah. That the battle was about him and not about Yah. Does that make sense? The victory and the praise and the adulation ended up really getting to his head, and he ended up stepping outside of his role as king and making the role of king into a bad thing, right? We know later on that he loses the confidence of Samuel and, clearly of Yah, that the spirit of Yah leaves from Saul, that he starts off a righteous man, starts off a just man, and starts off, humble and not wanting to accept this role, but ends as a man who is jealous, ends as a man who is bitter and struggling to cleave to the failing kingdom, or the kingdom slipping out of his hands and going into another man's hands, right? And so we see this in Saul, that he is grasping for straws, grasping for the the remnants of power that he has left. And, you know, eventually it's taken from him. Eventually Yah repents from making Saul king. I repent. I apologize for making this man my king. And we will have to go to another. The spirit of Yah leaves Saul. And of course, his last days were much worse than his first. He becomes so jealous of David, you know, after David becomes gallant in war, and he hears, you know, the virgins singing about him and David's war victories over his. And he said, okay, well, if they're talking about David's killed his tens of thousands, what's left for them to say about him? But he's king, but the kingdom. And then now he's thinking, oh, my lineage, all of this stuff he's thinking. And he's going crazy, right? And we know he's thinking of his lineage because of the way he goes at his son Jonathan. Like, Jonathan, you love David, right? You two are best friends, but you don't recognize that the kingdom is going to him and not to you, right? And not to your line. It's leaving your line. So it's not in your best interest to be friends with David, right? But he was, because he saw who David was, right? They were closer than, you know, man and woman in a perfectly legitimate way, but they were close, right? And so we see the end of Saul as, you know, one of the great failures in Israelite history, because he completely leaves the presence of Yah and the counsel of Yah, because he can't, you know, communicate anymore because of his wrongdoing. And when he can't communicate with Yah anymore, he then goes to seek the witch of Endor. And the witch, and now, you know, just a little bit of a side note here. A lot of people believe that, and let me just tell you the story, you know, before we get to the side note. We see the witch of Endor conjure up Samuel in order for Samuel to tell King Saul what to do in battle. So he's going, you know, beyond, he's overlooking Yah. He's like, if Yah's not going to speak to me, then I'm going to go the other route, right? The other route is satanic, right? This witch has a covenant with some demon, and that's the way that she prophesies, right? This witch is, who is in Endor, right? And so he goes to this witch, and the witch starts to do her thing. And not only does Samuel come up, but what she calls, well, the Bible calls Elohim, right? Elohim start to come up from the earth, come up from the earth, not come down from heaven. Watch it now, not come down, come up. For people that believe that when you die, you go directly to heaven. Why then did Samuel, when he died, why didn't he come down? What Samuel said is, why have you disturbed me from my slumber? Why have you risen me up? See, Samuel was asleep in Abraham's bosom, and he in Abraham's bosom is in the earth. And so he had to be raised up. And so this is what people don't recognize. You guys got to read the book of Enoch to understand even the shape, the structure of the world, and how the world works. And we know that there are scriptures that the spirit of man goes up and the spirit of beast goes down. We understand that. But what happens when you die, right? Right? What Yahusha describes in Luke chapter 16 is that there are places in the earth, one called Abraham's bosom and one called the chasm or the pit, the abyss, that where Abraham's bosom is paradise. It's nice, comfy, people are sleeping there. But across this huge gulf, and on the other side, people can see Abraham and his bosom in that area over there. But those people on the other side are in torments. And we know this from the story of Lazarus and the rich man. Lazarus, who sat at the rich man's gate and begged for food, and you know, the rich man never did give him any. They both die. One goes to Abraham's bosom and one goes to the pit, you know, where there is no water, right? And, you know, the rich man is begging for water to cool the tip of his tongue. And he said, no. He said, at least to Abraham, at least let me go up and warn my brothers about this place so that they can, you know, not come here like me. And, you know, what does Abraham say? They have Moses, right? They have Moses as their witness. But surely if one believes that if I come from the dead, and this is a prophecy, a foretelling of Yahushua coming from the dead and doing the same thing. Well, what if one comes from the dead? Surely, they'll believe then. If you don't believe Moses, you're not going to believe you either. So, again, we see the structure of the world looking a little bit strange. People will tell you, okay, well, that's a parable, but it's not. He has no reason to make up a parable in a fantasy reality, right? You make up parables in the real world. The parable exists in the real world, The parable about the king and his son making a dinner for his wedding. It's not a fake dinner. It's not a fake kingdom. It's not a fake king. It's not a fake son. It's all real. It's all real. The parable is to tell a story, but the surrounding scenario is still real. So Luke chapter 16 with Lazarus and the rich man, yeah, there may be parabolistic people, but the surrounding scenario is definitely real. It's definitely real. And to go back to Saul and Samuel, Saul gets risen up from Abraham's bosom, which is why, Samuel gets risen up from Abraham's bosom, which is why he says, why have you awakened me from my slumber? Why have you risen me up? Why have you risen me up? That means that he did not come down from heaven. He came up from a place in Sheol. See, everybody really goes to hell. And I know it's a weird thing to say that everybody goes to hell, but what we know of as hell is not all that Sheol is. We just know the half that the people who are getting judged go to, right? The place that has torments and no water. The other half is Abraham's bosom. And so we know this because of the book of Enoch, chapter 22, where it talks about the hollow places inside the earth that are set aside for the spirits of men. Such and such place for the spirits of the wicked, and then such and such place for the spirits of the righteous. And I think that there's, different compartments in each place. But even the book of Enoch describes there being a gulf, like a river, a deep chasm that divides the two, that you can't go from one side to the other, but you can see across it. The book of Enoch tells the entire thing. The book of Luke, when Yahushua is describing it with Lazarus and the rich man, describe the exact same scenario, even with the chasm in the middle. And then Samuel, describes the same situation by saying to the witch of Endor, why'd you bring me up? See, people want to discard that so bad that when I was in school getting my education in the Bible, I was told that wasn't Samuel that the witch of Endor was bringing up, that it was the devil. Disguised as Samuel, giving correct prophecies about Saul and his son, right? Which we know is not the case. We know that was Samuel, and we know that Yah can use a witch if he wants to prove a point. Yah, there's nothing that Yah can't do, right? He used the king of Babylon, who destroyed the temple, to bring salvation to Babylon, right? At the end of Nebuchadnezzar's career, he exclaimed that Elohim was Elohim, right? The Elohim of the Hebrews is the Elohim of heaven. He said it twice, What is it, 4 and 3? Daniel 4 and 3? Daniel 4 being written by Nebuchadnezzar himself. So if king of Babylon can be a tool of Elohim, you don't think the witch of Endor can? So with that being said, Samuel comes up and gives Saul his fate, right? Directly from Yah. He's like, you want it, you got it, right? He said, you searching for me, you're looking so hard to get this battle over the Philistines? Well, you're not going to get it. You're not going to win the battle. You and your son will perish in the battle, is what Samuel tells him. And we have there the end of Saul's story. Okay, sons, the end of Saul's story, a really sad and discouraging end to, go back in there, boys, and discouraging end to Saul in Israelite history. And I guess we'll just go ahead and do 1 and 1 and 1 because my boys are needing me right now. This has been 3 Kings, Part 1, Theory of Everything 21. Shalom, shalom, guys.